Welcome everybody to Rob's MetalWorks. We are here in New Braunfels at the CBQ Smokehouse for an unprecedented conversation. Tonight, we're not interviewing musicians, we're interviewing San Antonio media masters. I have with me the two Chucks, Chuck Stanley and Chuck McKittick. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. You know, Mr. Chavez, I've always been a huge fan, so to grace your airwaves, this is one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do. I'm not lying.
Welcome, Chuck Stanley.
Can you tell my staff I'm a legend?
You are, man. I can see all your memorabilia around here. Looks great.
Well, tell them to show up to work on time. Tell my staff I'm a legend.
And that you did a lot of cool things and you continue to support rock and metal music in San Antonio. And that's one of the things that, that I really wanted to discuss today. And Chuck McKittick and I, we see each other at shows. And I've seen you when we did the Battle of the Bands judging things. And, it's like rock and metal music is just ingrained in who we are as people. But one of the things that I found fascinating about wanting to do this interview is kind of to get your guys' perspectives, because you guys have been in this city for a long time and, are still fans. And I think at the heart of everything that we do, whether we're sportscasters or former DJ turned restaurateur, we still continue to love heavy music. So I want to start with each of you, because we're veterans. We've been around for a while.
As my kitchen staff says, viejo.
Yeah, we're getting there. Let's talk about the early beginnings of your love for heavy music. So let's start there. Chuck McKittick, when did you start listening to heavy music?
Back as far as I can remember, when I was a kid in the 70s, we're pretty much all products of what was given to us on the radio. And I'll never forget when I heard Radar Love by Golden Earring. I thought, that sounds a little bit different than what I'm used to. And then, there were some kids in the neighborhood that had older siblings that were listening to Aerosmith and Thin Lizzy. And I got turned on pretty quickly. And once I did, I never went back. And I went through the Kiss years like most kids my age. And then, the Van Halen stuff came out, and that to me was life-changing as well. And then, as I've gotten older, I tell this story too, because I'm a huge source of embarrassment for my own children. The older I get, the heavier I get, and I'm really not good at turning the page and going back.
Heavier music, not like Chuck and I, heavier in weight.
But it's got to be, and it's, I'm usually the oldest guy there, and I don't like to get in the pit or do anything stupid like that, but I just enjoy that tribal beats that those guys put out, or no matter who it is. So still go to a lot of shows, and I tell people this, whether they believe me or not, as much of a sports fan as I am, I'm infinitely more a metal fan than I am a sports fan. I don't know if a lot of people know that.
Wow.
I think we have a parallel life here, because Kiss, saw Kiss on TV and you're just mesmerized, like, what is that? Then you see stuff like Van Halen, and where I grew up in Houston, this is something we were talking to before we started taping. There's a rock station in Houston that had a TV show that played videos. It was 101 KLOL in Houston, and they had a 101 rock place. They would show music videos. You just watched it. They were rock videos. So you loved it. And now I'm a source of embarrassment for my kids as well, because I'll be playing something like the new Hell Yeah or Mudvayne, and Daddy, he sounds like he's trying to fart.
It's the highest form of art, kids. Get with it.
So I used to play it to piss off my parents. Now I do it to piss off the kids.
Well, we obviously, we live in a city that has a history of embracing heavy music and rock. We've always had bands come through our city, and we've been fortunate enough for that. And I remember back in the day, San Antonio was known as the heavy metal capital of the world. Where did that come from, in your opinion?
I'll let you go first, Chucky.
Well, when I moved here, when I started at Kiss in '95, I learned from it. So I came in towards the latter part of it and then rode the wave as it continued. I didn't certainly start it. I learned it from listeners and from people I worked with, T-Bone and Brian Kendall and Lyle, and everybody just taught me. Then I saw people I started to get to know here in town, some of the local bands. Donnie Van Stavern definitely told me a lot of stories. I don't know where it started. All I know is that I came here. It was a match made in heaven. I learned the wave had already started. I just simply jumped on it and rode it till the end.
For me, I was a military kid, so I lived everywhere. And my first 2 years of high school in the early 80s was in a really small town in North Carolina. And so we were getting a lot of Molly Hatchet, a lot of Southern rock was starting to take off, Blackfoot, those kinds of bands. So I listened to those my first 2 years. And then when I moved to San Antonio for my junior year in 81 and my senior year in 82, Joe Anthony was on Kiss, and he was turning me onto stuff. I was like, Scorpions, who are they? So there was all this stuff that was coming out, and he was blasting whatever he wanted. Schenker, Scorpions, all those bands that came out then, I had never even heard of. So it opened up like this whole huge extra catalog to me that I was able to, you go out and get Animal Magnetism, but then, oh wait, they got Virgin Killer, Love Drive, all these other records that were before that. You get all those, and then on top of the Van Halen that everybody else was playing, and then Judas Priest, same thing, Iron Maiden, bands that I'd never even heard of, all of a sudden I'm turning on to, and it was like, and I couldn't get enough. There was like this whole new world that was open to me, and then all of a sudden you start throwing off the Kisses of the world and some of these other bands, the Blackfoots, the Molly Hatchets, maybe bands that, were part of your life and help you build your own personal preferences, but man, once I got turned on to those bands, there was no looking back.
I think. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I want to jump on top of the Joe Anthony thing. Joe passed before I came to Kiss in '95, so all I did was I heard stories about Joe from listeners, and then as I started to take over the interview responsibilities at the radio station, started being the bands would bring it up to me. The bands would, and some of the bands, of course, didn't know he passed. They would bring up, is he still there? Or they would say when he passed, when I told them they passed, they would tell me stories. Up until 2004, when I was slowly starting to retire, bands were still bringing up his name and what he did, and it's just unbelievable that a DJ had that much influence.
Sure. On a whole generation, really, because it took off.
Some of those bands like Saxon, Budgie, Triumph, would have never even had careers in this town without Joe Anthony. So I can understand why he was important to them.
Lars Ulrich, in November of 2004, I was doing some interviews. Lars brought him up. This is the man that's traveled the world and done 1,000 different interviews. Lars brought him up. I didn't introduce the topic of Joe. He brought it up. He brought it up that they played down at the
Daddy's. I was there.
Or the Cameo.
They played at Daddy's, a free show when Kill 'Em All came out. I was there. And listen, they opened.
It was after that.
But listen, they opened for a band called Raven. I'm sure you know. But it was like, I had no idea what Kill 'Em All was all about. A friend of mine said, hey, I got this record. They're playing for free. We got to go. I'm like, well, they said the operative word, free. I got like 7 picks that night. I'd never heard anything like that. But yeah, I mean, they were getting airplay in San Antonio long before a lot of other places were playing.
And he remembered that.
Wow.
In 2004.
Wow.
So that's the kind of respect that Joe earned, and the rest of us at KISS just kind of rode the wave and turned on to so many fans of some of the stuff we wouldn't have heard.
Right. It's I'm glad Joe Anthony came up in this interview, because undoubtedly, his presence opened the doors for a lot of fans and bands. So thank God for Joe Anthony.
No, without a doubt. I only met him one time, and it was really weird because I was dating a girl in college at the time, and we went to go eat at his restaurant on San Pedro, and I don't even remember the name of it. Wow. And he was in there, and she basically said, he's your biggest fan, and I felt infinitely embarrassed. It's like, come on, don't sell me out like that. But it was cool that, I think he got a little bit of a charge that, somebody actually knew who he was. And again, I mean, he obviously had a passion for the music, and his passion, I think, turned on a lot of kids at the time and really helped start the whole generation for what was to become in the 80s.
And I think too now, not only is we talk about the greatness of heavy music in our city, but with all of these bands being recognized and respected and loved and endeared as we've gone through the years, but also the influence that those bands had on our local musicians. Because we've always had a great rock and metal scene. Local musicians come, and those guys were obviously influenced by these bands. And now we've, the history of great local San Antonio bands, some of them who've garnished much success. Mm-hmm. Like, Chuck, I walk around your place here and, I see, things of, some stuff that you have of the Union Underground, who obviously one of the most successful bands out of San Antonio. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just became friends with the guys as they were going up through the ranks. So it's nothing more than they were just a good band, and I like a good band.
Yeah.
But Joe's influence and just the scene of San Antonio music or San Antonio metal, I still see stuff from Patrick, who is a guitarist for Union. He's doing his own thing now. He's out playing with Lita Ford right now.
Yeah.
And you still see Pat mentioning bands or music, records that he finds, and he'll reference, heard this on Kiss back in the 80s, or Godfather Joe passed this along to me. You still see that influence to this day. Those guys definitely carried the torch for San Antonio wherever they went. There's one of those bands that when they went on stage, we're blah, blah, blah from San Antonio, Texas.
Yep.
And they made it known. They weren't ashamed about it. They loved it.
Yeah.
And they still do it to this day.
Guys, with San Antonio ties to Machine Head.
Yeah.
You got
Dave McClain from
you got guitar players that played with Halford. I mean, it's
the Jarzombic brothers.
That's right. I mean, so it's really cool. You're right. I mean, those guys must have been touched somehow, and I can only imagine. I'm sure if you asked them, it would have to be because they were listening to Kiss and what Joe Anthony was spinning every night.
And, as we've, lived through this history, we've seen things change. We've seen clubs come and go. We've seen club owners come and go, bands come and go. That's, I think, when you get to our tenure, we realize that the only thing that's inevitable is change. Change always happens. So let's talk about some of our favorite venues. Who are some of the clubs that you loved going to back in the day, or that you enjoyed? I mean, I had my favorite. One of my favorites, I remember I used to love going there, and I used to love shooting bands there, and that was at Sunset Station. I didn't miss Sunset Station.
Yeah, I did too, but I know we were big sneakers guys.
Sneakers.
I mean, good. I mean, we were there. I was there at least once a week. I'd go there after softball games. Our buddy Jay King ran the place. It was a great place to go. I mean, I've got great stories from that place. Just guys from bands that were there. I mean, I've been through some of the darkest days of my life I spent at Sneakers. I mean, just stories you wouldn't even believe that, because I was at Sneakers and, some of the music I was listening to at the time, I mean, spooky stories, but Sneakers will always have a huge place in my heart.
Yeah, 11431 Perrin Vital. It was right down the road from the radio station. After we get done with work, that's where we were. And it was a rock club playing rock music. Looking at the stage, the bathroom to the left backstage. We can't tell stories from back there. But
remember, no incriminating stories, Chuck.
I don't have my lawyer present, so we won't be talking about that. But that, not the stage right where the dressing room was, stage left behind the stage where the little bathroom was. Many torrid tales.
I remember Showcase Theater too on West Avenue. Saw a lot of great local bands there. The first time I ever saw Las Cruces there, Alienation there. Loved that place. I remember there was a guy, Carlos, I know you're out there somewhere. Carlos used to run that place, and man, not to get Carlos in trouble, but we used to do whatever we wanted in that club. And I think places like Showcase and places like Sneakers, one of the things that we loved about those places was that it wasn't just that we could go there and watch a show. It was that there was a brotherhood there. There was a community there. And I kind of feel like in this day and age, we've lost a little bit about that. When I meet new club owners, I tell them, I said, you have to build this community here, and because that's what we are. And if you can do that, man, you'll have a successful business.
Sneakers, I think the reason Sneakers was embraced is up on the walls, you saw when the bands played, they put dates up there. It wasn't living in the past. It was celebrating these moments happened. Whether it was right above the entrance, Metallica partied here in '92. They didn't play here, they partied here. So what? We embraced it. It was fun. You saw the Tommy Lee's drum kit and all these other bands that maybe we heard of them, maybe we didn't. It was about a celebration of rock music, and unabashedly so. That's why sneakers was special.
And to me, I mean, I had so many moments. I mean, I remember one time I went back there and Jay said, "Hey, Steve Vai's playing. Why don't you come?" Sure, great. We went back and we got to meet Steve Vai before he went on. He was sick as a dog, puking his guts up, and it was like, dude, why are you going to go out on stage? He's like, man, if I don't do it, then my boys don't get paid. Right. He not only went out on stage, he played for 2 freaking hours. A total pro, was super nice. I mean, that's one of those things you know as a fan, you normally don't get to see that side of who these guys are as human beings. And that's just one of the many moments where I think I'll never forget that not only did he play sick, I mean, he played for 2 hours sick and played very well, of course, too.
I got one sick story that I know, and it's not sick as in my lawyer needs to be here, but sick. Scott Stapp, who I know you're a friend of, and you love him. Yep. They did a show at the Freeman Coliseum in '99. I think it was November of '99.
That's the heyday.
Freeman Coliseum, and they were recording that show for something. I don't even know what it is, but I have the recording of it. He was sick with laryngitis. He had throat issues. So they were all afternoon long. We didn't talk about this on the air because it was almost canceled. Which I can talk about this now because who cares? They were shooting his throat full of all this steroids and stuff to get his voice back up to snuff. And the reason he did it was because it was San Antonio. We at the radio station had been playing them, and they knew this town was important for rock. Anyway, he went on, he got better, went on, performed a great show. It was one of their live recordings that's out there. And it's because of this town.
Wow. People have a passion for us because we are passionate for the music.
Yes, and that shows.
Yeah.
Trust me, that shows.
Now, I have a couple of poignant questions for each of you. Chuck, you first. Chuck Stanley. I love your place here, man. I've been to CBQ now several times. I love eating here and hanging here and drinking here. And as I look around, it's you have a lot of memories on the wall, And part of your repertoire at KISS was that, you had to interview some of these guys. Oh my God, what a horrible job. As I see, Dave Draymond, I see Sully Erna. You got all these guys. Talk a little bit about that. Did you enjoy interviewing some of these big rock stars?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was my job to go to shows, go to concerts, interview bands, talk about whatever. I enjoyed it because I didn't like what I was seeing out there. So I wanted to interview them a little differently, get answers out of them. I just embraced it. I did research. It was fun for me to try and get them to embrace the moment. And yes, I loved it. When I didn't like it, it's when I retired. I got bored. I got complacent. And it's like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I'd interviewed almost everybody that I wanted to interview. A few of them I didn't get, but I got a lot of white whales. And then it's like, this ain't fun anymore. That's when it started to I need to find something else to do, because that's going to show. It's going to show that you don't give a shit. It shows.
And as you kind of lead us down that road, let's talk quickly about that, because people who know you, know that obviously you were a great personality on air, and then you continued to work with KISS, but we're kind of on the back end. You were doing some program director work, and then, like I was telling you a little while ago, all of a sudden I heard, Chuck Stanley's no longer in the radio business. He's a restaurateur now. Why did you make that choice? What led you down that new path?
It was exactly what we just talked about.
Okay.
I just got bored. And that's a horrible thing to say, what we got to do for a living. We got to play music. We got to go to concerts. We got to interview bands. We got to do all this. I just got bored. Absolutely bored. What are you drinking?
He's the wit.
Wit.
The wit. It's good.
Retail, rye wit. Just tell them. I got bored. It just wasn't exciting anymore. And that's a horrible thing to say, but I knew that it was going to come across as I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't like where radio was going anyway. And I can bore you with 20 minutes of that. Radio at that time in June, or actually May of 2006, was heading in a direction I didn't like. I saw something out on the horizon. I smelled a rat.
Right.
So I just started making my own plans to leave before somebody made that decision before me. So I got to do everything on my own terms.
Great.
As I left, as time unfolded in 2006, 2007, that rat came true. So a lot of my friends, talk about morning shows that used to be here.
Yep.
A lot of stuff that didn't go the way they wanted to. I saw that rat in May of 2006. I think I need to do something else. So I hate the fact that my premonition came true, but I had to get out.
You're a smart man.
Anyway, I was a fat kid, so I love food. I got into, I learned how to cook a little bit better and make people happy cooking. And this came into, I just fell into this.
And it's a fabulous thing,
Yeah.
And you now, Chuck McGinnick, I mean, I see you and you're traveling all over the place, and you have access to all these great athletes that people admire and they watch on the TV every week. You meet these guys, pro athletes, you're making millions of dollars, and so I'm sure you're privy to some, off-camera conversations and off other conversations, and when you does a conversation of music ever come up? Do you talk to some of these guys? I know some of these guys listen to heavy music. I've known lots of sports people who are into heavy music.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's usually the guys that I gravitate to. I mean, like my favorite guy that ever came through here, Travis Blackley, was a pitcher for the Missions. He made it to the big leagues, probably pitched 4 or 5 years in the big leagues, but like you guys get freaking tats all over the place. But this kid was from Australia, and those are the kind of guys that I gravitate to, and it was the same thing, and I'm still friends with Travis to this day. He's actually pitching in Mexico now, and he's always turning me on to new stuff. Who's that band that's out? Parkway Drive. Okay. So he gets me onto that band. I mean, it's still, one of those things where, yeah, you're like you said, it's a community. So even if you run into an athlete, I'm going to run into guys like that. And it seems like it's harder to find guys that are willing to, admit that, hey, they're flying the flag for heavy metal. But, I was always one of those guys too, Rob, where, I had to go kicking and dragging into each century at each decade, because, I was stuck in the 80s forever. All my friends will tell you. And then, I got on the Alice in Chains bandwagon like in the mid-90s, which was probably 3 years after they were already smoking. But they dragged me into the 90s, and then, it was, the 2000s came along, and Godsmack got me going, and a couple other bands. But I've always been kind of a little behind the curve. But, once I get there, I'm still probably behind the curve on a lot of stuff, but, I'll get there eventually. So, I like to gravitate towards the athletes that are pretty much doing the same thing that I am.
And I'll be honest with you, when I first found out that you were a heavy music fan, I was kind of surprised. I mean, you don't look like you said, you don't fit the quote unquote stereotype of someone who loves heavy music. But when you tell people, or people find out that you love heavy music, because one of the things that Rob's MetalWorks has always advocated for was that heavy music is an art form, and that there's, the people who listen to heavy music are not these dumb high school dropouts who smoke weed, even though some of them are. Right. But not all of us, okay? And so, I always love, that's one of the things that intrigued me about this interview today, was that I'm going to meet some guys who are, they don't fit the stereotype, and they're articulate, and they're smart, successful guys, and they love heavy music, and that's great. And so when people find out about you, Chuck, that you're like, oh, Chuck, you're an Atreyu fan? What do you say to them?
Well, I think now, I've been in the market for so long, I don't think it surprises anybody now, because I keep seeing the same faces at these shows. But I don't know. I mean, again, I think this music picks you, you don't pick it. I mean, it's all about part of who we are. Somebody puts on Frank Sinatra, I got friends that'll listen to that and talk about, the chairman of the board and all that. I mean, I can't listen to that. I argue anywhere to anybody. You take some Alice in Chains song and just look at the lyrics and tell me if that's not like Robert Frost-like, where, okay, maybe they're talking about death or shooting up or whatever, but by golly, it's clever, it's thoughtful, and there's infinite ways to get messages out of what you're reading or what you're listening to, sonically or, lyrically, whatever it is. I mean, a lot of these bands are, Some of them aren't. Some of them are just like a lot of the bands you hear today, where you're hearing third grade lyrics. I say, I tell my kids, man, the stuff you listen to, I could write those lyrics while I'm, on the can and be done with it and like have it kicked out like that. But most of the stuff that we listen to, most of it, not all of it, there's some thought. There's a lot of thought behind it, and it is very much a high form of art, in my opinion. That's why I like it so much.
I just would see him at sneakers. And people would tell me through my drunken haze, that's the guy on TV.
That's the sportscaster guy.
All right, cool. And just knew him through being at sneakers.
Yeah.
Okay, so what? He was on TV.
Yeah.
I was there, and he was a construction worker during the day. It was a rock community.
Yeah.
Didn't care. Who cares?
Doctors, teachers, lawyers. I mean, you name it. They were all in there because, everybody was a Priest fan. Or, okay, we're going to see Iron Maiden in there, but they got, Blaze singing instead of, whoever else they may have had in there singing. I mean, it was just a really cool place to hang out. And, again, it's hard to pigeonhole the metal community, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And Chuck Stanley, one of the things too that I follow you on Facebook, and one of the things I've kind of noticed in the recent past is like you've been pulling things out of your archive, man, and I see you post pictures, and some of these things are like official press releases that the station received. And a lot of times when a news story breaks, it's not always happy. It's not always a good event. Something bad happened
I've had to
that you got to report. So that's my question. If you think about some of those things that maybe weren't, glamorous, what thing sticks with you the most?
Well, when I did the feature on the radio station was the Rock Report, and that came to be because simply I enjoyed the rock
I used to
news.
love the Rock Report.
And I loved doing it. I loved being the news person. So I would get all those press releases. I had to do the fun stuff. I had to do the bad stuff. I remember doing the Lane Staley.
Oh, yeah.
That was on a Saturday, April 20th. And
So you're like the first person in the entire city to know that.
yeah, because I had...
That was before the internet.
That was... I'm trying to think...
I got a Lane story, too.
That one came... Okay, no, that definitely came from Record Company. Interview Dave from Drowning Pool. I had announced that one. The Dimebag Darrell one in November of 2004 was terrible, because that one actually did come from the Record Company. I got a call because that was on it was November 8th. We all know that one. It's about 10 o'clock at night. Brian Kendall's on the air. He calls me and goes, man, we're getting some calls. We're getting some reports about this. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, somebody from the Record Company called me and said, it's true. This is what's going down. That's what we know. So I was like, oh, Christ. Wow. So I went up to the radio station, got on the internet, which was sort of doing okay back in 2004, but it wasn't what we know now. Start finding this information. Brian and I go on the air together, probably about midnight or so, and we just start feeding the information that we had. That's all we could do, was just blurt out what we knew. And by 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, went home, and that's all you can do. And subsequently from there, you just spit out the information that you knew, and those are the ones that stunk, that you had to deal with the death stuff, because people just were ravenous for information.
Those things stay with you because you just never forget them.
And for me, Chuck's right. The Lane Staley deal was on a Saturday, and I was there. Spurs were playing Seattle in the playoffs at the time, and we had a crew in Seattle, and we were talking back and forth with the guys in Seattle there, and I knew our newscast would run something on it. I knew our newscast wouldn't do it justice. So I ended my sportscast that night. We had a 30-minute show. I ran the entire grind video, and I caught so much crap from my bosses for doing it, but I didn't care. I mean, that deeply affected me. And I remember talking to one of the Fox guys in Seattle about, hey, is this big news up in Seattle? And he goes, oh, you better believe it. He goes, and he had a great Lane Staley story. He was talking about, like 2 months earlier, he had been out and about. He was about to run out of gas. He was in a bad part of Seattle. I don't know what that means. Seattle's pretty nice everywhere, but if there is a ghetto place in Seattle, he was there filling up his car with gas because he was about to run out of gas, and he saw Lane Staley come out of the men's room, and he'd been having a party of one and looked like a mess. And so I think everybody there got the sense that the end was near for Lane Staley. But same thing with Dime. I wasn't as big of a Pantera fan as I was an Alice in Chains fan, but I did the exact same thing that night too. I ran about a minute-long video with just like a video tribute. I don't even remember what song I ran, but it was just all Dime clips, video clips, and it was like, because it does. This music affects you. It's what you grow up with. It's little soundtrack pieces of your life, and so you feel like you owe it to the artist to like, hey, he's dead. I'm going to eulogize this guy in the air, and I don't even care at this point. It's like if somebody's going to get mad the next day, it's like I ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Well, I kind of feel like people like us, we have that responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know how to put this into words that don't sound pretentious or make me seem like an asshole. But some of these people you started to build a rapport with, and because of my position in the radio station, you would meet these people. By no means were we friends, but you did have a sort of a business rapport with these people. So when Dave from Drowning Pool died, we knew the guys in the band. They knew the local guys, Union Underground, Dallas, San Antonio. We were all kind of the record company. You saw how it affected internally. You didn't see just the fans getting affected. You saw how it affected the rest of the band,
behind the scenes,
the people in the record company that knew these people, that were with them day in, day out. And that's where it kind of hit close to home for a lot of this, because it's like, it wasn't just fans. These are people you interacted with all the time.
And there's so many, life, we're almost 20 years into the new millennium, and it seems like it's going faster than ever. There's always all these new bands. We've talked about some of these new bands. We listen to these new bands, and yet, as veterans of the scene and life, we also lost a lot of people this past year. God, I can't. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, I can't imagine. It's hard for me to understand how many significant people we've lost in the rock world, in the music world, and we're only in June 2016.
It started in December, for me, as far as I can remember, December of last year with Weiland, and then it just started happening. And it's well, I don't even know what day it is anymore, but it hasn't stopped.
Lost Nick Menza from Megadeth, an ex-drummer from Megadeth not too long ago.
Oh, Lemmy, Bowie, Glenn Fry, producers. Weiland. I know there's some people in between there that I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
These are not just, these are monumental losses. I don't care if you didn't like the Eagles.
No, that's right.
I don't care if you love Big Lebowski and you know what he feels about the Eagles. Glenn Fry made music.
Yeah.
He single-handedly created the classic rock format.
You're right. All huge losses, and I think that's been the cool thing about, just me having my own little piece of the pie in San Antonio for all these years is I can kind of infiltrate other areas that I want to go to. And, one of the coolest stories I ever had was getting on a tour bus, being the bus bitch, and Lemmy, when Motorhead was playing. And I mean, all I wanted was for him to say, hey, this is Lemmy from Motorhead and you're watching Maximum Sports. So it was cool. Jay let me go back there and we were on the bus with him and he never said it. He was like, I had like this 3-minute long soundbite where he's like, they want me to talk about sports and I don't know nothing about it, but I'm here, and he seemed like a nice enough guy, but he never said, I'm Lemmy, Motorhead, Maximum Sports. And I just didn't have the heart to say, so I went and I ran some of it afterwards, but, interviewing Jerry Cantrell, huge highlight of my life, I was so freaking rock star, around him. I think I said the word flabbergasted 5 times during the interview, and he even stopped me and said, boy, you sure like that word. And I was like, wow, have I really said it that many times? But, Nikki Sixx, Mustaine, I mean, all these different guys were,
Mustaine, good.
Guys from, the guys from Disturbed, where you go and you're doing like sports stuff, but you can do the music stuff too, and you're getting the sports perspective from the rock side, and, those to me are all really cool little, you break up the monotony of the everyday X's and O's stuff.
Was Lemmy the sneaker show, the Motorhead the sneaker show?
Yes.
So after the sneaker show, right around the corner from the radio station, right around the corner from Sneakers, Brian Kendall's house. And everybody went to Brian Kendall's house. So we're all there after the concert at Brian's house. And we're all there just hanging around, drinking. You had a pool. This pool has hosted bands galore. Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20 still owes me 3 packs of cigarettes from 1997. But Lemmy and Motorhead show up at Brian Kendall's house.
Wow.
Guess what Brian Kendall's out of? Jack Daniels.
Oh, no. Who did he send to the store?
This was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, God, yeah.
There's no store. There's Lemmy Kilmister walking into your damn living room. And Brian will tell this story to this day. What did he just run out of? Jack Daniels.
Did Lemmy hang around?
No. No, he did not.
Wow. Gentlemen, oh my God. We could sit here and talk all day. I'm sure we're running out of memory on my camera by now. Any last words, anything that we missed, anything you want to share with the people in San Antonio and around the world who will see this interview?
Well, I'd just like to say, to you guys, I've known Chuck forever because Brian, who we used to work with, BK, over at KISS, he and I were essentially suite mates in college. And so we both had this huge love for heavy metal. Brian always had the long hair. I was always, the clean cut guy. But we still had that in common. Brian and I went to go see, never forget, Killer Dwarfs in Saxon in Austin. He drove. He shouldn't have. And then, so, I met Chuck through him. And then you, my friend, I was a huge fan of your show. Because of your show, I got turned on to bands that I never thought I would ever listen to. Seven Dust, Drowning Pool come to mind. And like I said, just seeing you in the club one day and it's like, I know you, and you look at me, I know you. We don't know each other, but instantly it's like, man, I'm watching you, you're watching me, and I think we've been buddies ever since. So this has been a real pleasure. And honestly, you can get me to talk metal anywhere, anytime, day or night, I'm your guy.
How about you, Mr. Stanley?
Again, thank you. You're doing what you like, and you carry this passion through. So, however people discover music, find the positive way to discover it. You're doing it the positive way. You're getting music that you like out there. Don't focus on what stations, wink, wink, are not playing what you don't want to hear anymore, what you want to hear. Focus on what you can find good music, whether it's you, satellite radio, social media, who cares? If you're finding it, find it positively. Don't focus on who's not playing what.
And one final thing, I tell my kids this all the time too, is that we are all responsible, all of us, every single one of us, for wrecking the music industry. We all bear some form of guilt in this. If you like an artist, for God's sakes, go out and spend $10 and buy the record. This is how these bands eat, and this is how they survive, and this is, if you like their art and you want to hear more, then support the arts. It's like going to the Whitty or, going wherever concert hall you're going to go to or going to a sporting event. You're paying hard cash to go and be entertained. If you like the music, buy the music. Stop ripping it off all the time.
Done. Perfect. Exactly it. Everything he just said is exactly true.
Thank you for saying that. I was going to ask that question, but I didn't want to open that can of worms because that would have taken us into a whole nother dimension. Sir, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Chuck. And Chuck, it's been such a great conversation. This interview will immortalize all of us. It will live on forever as we talk about heavy music here at this wonderful place. All you people out there, if you haven't been to CBQ Smokehouse in New Braunfels, you better come visit sometime soon because the food is great and the beers are even better. You saw Chuck and Chuck right here on Rob's MetalWorks. Yeah!